gonna forget. Okay, so we're recording. And Adam, I'm just, like I said, I hear your name almost everywhere. And I definitely want to know how you got into doing all the advocacy that you do. But before that, I did want to share with you a little bit about this project. And I think you may have been in meetings where where Andrea's given a little debrief, or I may have given a debrief, but I just want to take an opportunity to share and, give you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have.
Okay.
Um, and so this project is a project that MPHA recently launched in collaboration with Neighbor to Neighbor, the base building group.
Mm-hmm.
And the aim of the project is, better transit, stable housing, cleaner air, and we want to do all of that through building power, within low-income communities and communities of color in the
Mm-hmm.
Worcester and Springfield areas. So those are kind of like the two regions that the project is targeting. And, oh, sorry, I didn't know if you were about to say something.
No, no.
Okay. So that's kind of the general goal of the project, and we really want this to be community driven. So we don't have any specific policy goals yet because we're currently in the assessment phase. And MPHA, we're doing stakeholder interviews like this one right here, and Neighbor to Neighbor is doing deep canvassing. So they're going and they're talking to Worcester and Springfield residents and asking them questions about housing and transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And our hope is later this year to bring, community organizations and residents together through assemblies where we kind of look at some of the needs that have come out through this process, and then have residents, decide what they think priorities should be for local and statewide campaigns to improve transit in Worcester and Springfield. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you today.
And I was at least part of that neighbor to neighbor meeting. So.
Cool. Okay, that's great. So I'm just curious to know how you got into how did you get into your advocacy work?
Well, to begin with, I don't drive at the moment.
Okay.
I haven't driven a car for 7 or 8 years. And at this point, I don't even have a driver's license. I'd have to reapply. And so one of the reasons why I was able to move to Worcester was because they did have a bus system.
Mm.
And I was living near Clark University, and there were 4 different buses I could take to get downtown. And so it really wasn't that much of a problem for me getting downtown, especially since most of these buses run on a half-hour schedule, which is as many buses as Worcester ever runs on a route. That's considered frequent here in Worcester. Now I'm living out off of Mill Street, and there's one bus which comes every half hour on weekdays and once an hour, if that, on Saturdays and Sundays. And so this is more of a challenge getting into town. If I had lived any further up Mill Street towards Tatnuk Square, I wouldn't have a bus at all. And that is something which I share with about half of the city, geographically speaking, is not covered by the bus system. Mm. And so when new public housing is proposed, this is something which the WRTA board has to really work on in order to get a new route approved, which will go there. So it's becoming harder and harder to get around on the buses, and it's kind of a wonky point, but basically the Department of Transportation feels that if a bus is not being filled to a certain extent, that bus line has to be looked at very carefully and perhaps canceled or cut back. And so what you end up with is a lot of insecurity for people who are on a bus that doesn't have a lot of people. What are you going to do? You're living out basically isolated except for the bus. And you don't know if that bus is going to be there or not next year. You really don't.
Yeah.
It can happen to any bus, that bus might be suddenly changed.
Yeah.
And there's really very little that can be done about it, because this is coming down from on high, on top of us. That's the way that and you end up with a situation where there's always going to be one route which has the fewest people on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that route is going to be looked at by the authorities to see what they can do ostensibly to improve it, but actually to get rid of it.
Mm.
And that's why we have half the routes and half the passengers that this system did 10 or 15 years ago. There's been a steady decline over this entire period of time. And I chalk it up to this policy of linking the bus system to the levels of ridership.
Mm. Okay.
Did that even come close to answering your question?
No, it absolutely answers the question, because I mean, if I were in your position, that would motivate me to want to be an advocate as well, because that's infuriating.
Well,
Yeah.
it's very complicated, because you see, the WRTA board is an advisory board.
Mm.
The system is actually run by the administrator, by Dennis Litka.
Mm.
And the routes are all decided and planned by Central Mass Regional Planning.
Mm.
The actual paying of the drivers and everyday running of the system is done by Central Mass Transit Management.
Mm.
They're the ones who write the paychecks, and they're the ones who are responsible for the conditions of the buses and for keeping everything on time and all of that.
Yeah.
So, and where the city council fits in with all of this is that each of the votes on the advisory board is weighted.
Mm.
And so so Worcester has such a heavily weighted vote, because we put so much more money into the system than the outlying communities, that we have a real control over what's going to be happening at that board. But it's not something which the city is likely to use that way. They're reluctant to use it, because at some point somebody's going to say to them, well, if you want all of that, why don't you pay for it?
Mm.
And the city has made plain that the contribution they're making now is all they want to put in to public transportation.
So you're saying, okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're saying, one, is complicated because essentially like every piece of this system is like controlled by a different entity. So it makes it hard to kind of like nail it down to one, right? So like there are all these pieces and maybe not all of them are communicating effectively with each other. And then you're also saying that that with the WRTA board, even though Worcester, wait, I think
Yeah.
So when you say weighted, you're talking about city council votes or the WRTA seats, and like, you know,
the representative for the city has the weighted vote.
Okay.
And for a long time, that was Jake Sanders at
Okay.
the city manager's office.
Okay.
He stepped out, and Ed Augustus suggested that Gary Rosen take the place.
Okay.
That's why Gary Rosen is on the board, and he'll probably remain there, even though he's not going to be running again for city council.
Interesting. And so Gary or whoever fills the Worcester seat in the WRTA board has a weighted vote, but the person in that seat is usually hesitant to use that weight, because if they do, they may get pressure for Worcester to have, like the city of Worcester, to have to put out more money for the WRTA. And so it kind of makes that a little complex. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that about the weighted votes. I did not know that. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, just to make things even more interesting, the WRTA nominally serves 37 municipalities.
Yeah.
12 of these have fixed routes which go to them in one way or another, and all the others participate to some extent. I think there's one town where there actually is no more of fixed transit, but they're still putting in a contribution out of the goodness of their hearts. And if you want to be part of the paratransit system, you have to be putting something in.
Okay. Wow. That's so interesting. And how, So how do you think, and I'm like, these aren't even questions that I have written down, but like, I just trying to understand some of these dynamics. So how do you think then that impacts the politics of the WRTA? You know what I mean? And how different decisions are made with about routes? Because yeah, that's kind of wild that, you know, it's supposed to serve 37, or it serves 37 municipalities, and quite and different municipalities are represented on the WRTA, but not everyone who's on the WRTA board then is a part of a municipality that has a fixed route, or are
Right.
all of the board members a part of municipalities that have fixed routes, or no?
They, you know, I'm not quite sure
Okay.
what about who can sit on the board, but I do
Yeah.
believe that all 37 communities have a seat there should they choose to use it.
Okay.
Typically, at a board meeting, back when they held them in person, you were lucky if you got more than about a 9 or 10 board members
Mm,
showing up before a meeting.
okay. Wow. That's really interesting. Um, I'm curious to know, because it sounds like you would have a really good institutional memory of this. Um, what are some changes, good or bad, that you've seen in transportation options in the Worcester area? And I know you've kind of already talked about a few as far as like the route cuts. But yeah, what are some other changes that you've seen to transportation options?
Well, it's really at this point it's a potential change, but
Mm,
it's something which has actually started in kind of a pilot project kind of a way. Uh, there's uh, there's no particular reason why the board and why the city can't can't hire other entities other than Central Mass Transit Management to run transportation services for them. There's a taxi voucher program. There are community vans which are connected in one way or another with the transportation system.
mm,
Last year, before all of this, before we all went into isolation, uh, there was an organization which showed up here in Worcester, offering to put in a last mile system,
mm,
which would bring people from their door or from somewhere near their door to a nearby bus stop, or
mm.
possibly allow them to take an entire trip. And
Okay.
that organization is VIA.
Via. Okay.
Now, VIA gave a presentation at City Council. We had a meeting with them in the city manager's office, and they were made a proposal that of how this would work. They didn't want to cannibalize the bus system. They wanted to augment what we already had.
Mm,
It went nowhere. It, since that time, I don't think there have been really many meetings about that.
mm,
Uh, the they they are running a pilot program though in Westboro, which
okay.
was supposed to be bringing people in a via owned and operated van from the train station to their places of employment. And this would also be available, I think, for people in Westboro who were taking similar routes. But that's a very limited sort of a program, and that was funded by a grant from DOT. It was one of the one of the grants that was being offered as part of a supplementary funding package. I think there was like $3 million, which everybody had to fight for, and we got a chunk of it for that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, up in Salem, Massachusetts, they went with a VIA program, and I don't know how that's going,
Mm,
but the way it works is for $2 or $3, they'll take you anywhere you want to go in the city. And so these are this is a program which I believe Salem is funding all by itself.
mm,
And that's the sort of thing that I'm hoping for
yeah.
here in Worcester, is a way of augmenting the bus system with rides like that.
Yeah.
Now we can even do that with a taxi voucher program, which actually does exist, although they keep downplaying it. But it's hopeful though that people are looking at it in any kind of a way, and it's good to know it's out there. And VIA also is pledged to operating ADA compliant equipment.
Mm,
And so this would be a real step forward for Worcester, which right now does not have any public vehicles.
mm,
There's no taxis which can handle a wheelchair in the entire city.
mm.
The red cab has been sold. They had one unit which could do this, one van which could handle a big wheelchair, and they say that it's off the road for repairs.
Oh, wow, really? The one, because I remember
Mhm.
I I'm blanking on who I was talking to, but someone had mentioned the fact that there was supposedly a taxi system or a taxi or two that was supposed to be able to handle wheelchairs, and that one was off the road pretty much permanently, and that there was only one that was functioning. So is that one still functioning, or are there like none at all right now?
And
Wow. Wow.
for a city this size,
Wow.
that's beyond shameful.
Yeah. Are there any other changes you can think about, either good or bad, that you've seen to transportation options in Worcester?
For a long time, I've been advocating for a bus which would go all the way up and down Park Avenue.
Mm,
And last year they did start a bus, the route number 8, which runs from Webster Square to the Greendale Mall.
okay.
And so it goes past a lot of shopping opportunities, a lot of places to have medical appointments and physical therapy
Mm,
and all of that. But they only run it once an hour.
okay.
And if it was running more frequently, then this route would connect with the number 6, the number 7, the number 19, the number 27, the number 33, the number 30, and the number 31. All of these buses could be connected with each other if the 8 ran more frequently,
Mm,
because nobody's going to be waiting an hour for a bus somewhere.
yeah.
And unfortunately, all of these connections I'm talking about occur at different places up and down the route.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're all coming together in some sort of a second hub.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's nice that they put it in. It's good that it's there.
Okay. And I'm curious, Adam, thinking about some of the changes that you've mentioned, right? So, the 8 bus, that like the cuts to the routes, right? Like thinking about some of the changes you mentioned. Have you seen some of those changes impact housing at all in the area?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, especially up towards Tatnuk Square.
Okay.
There was some changes in how the airport was being served,
Mm,
and so that impacted people living on uh, what is it? I can't remember the name of the street at the moment. I'll think of it in a while. But the bus just doesn't go there anymore, and so they have to walk quite a distance. And as you get up towards Tatnuk Square, you'll find the same sort of a situation with bus stops very far apart,
mm,
and the buses coming less frequently than they used to.
mm.
So it is a problem for some of the members of my group. Other places where there's sort of interesting kinds of problems are like at Coast Pond Village off of Mill Street.
Okay.
The bus on the way inbound only goes up to Coast Pond Village
Mm,
every third trip. So every hour and a half, it'll go up to Coast Pond, but a lot of people from Coast Pond will just walk down to the bottom of First Street there, so that they can catch a bus a little more often than every 90 minutes. Some people can't do that, and so they're really limited in how they can get out.
yeah.
And there's no particular reason why the bus couldn't go up there every time.
Mm, okay. And what about changes to like patterns in housing? Like have you noticed some of these changes in transportation having any impact on like where people choose to live, how much they pay to live somewhere? Any changes like that to housing that you've noticed?
Well, the the city has put in a great deal of what I guess you would call market rate housing
Mm,
all around the hub.
okay.
Now, these are people who you will never see on a public bus.
Mm.
They have parking garages. The place on the other side of the hub, the Edge, has its own van that they run people around in as part of their service for living there. So we never see those people on the bus.
Yeah.
And so and there's just no subsidized housing which is built around a transportation system, because we don't know what the transportation system is going to look like next year. You can't plan for this. It just simply can't be done.
Yeah.
And that gets back to the funding mechanism, because most of the money for running the operating expenses comes directly from the state through the Secretary of Transportation and the DOT.
Yeah.
The governor is always reluctant every year to raise the amount of money which is given to the RTAs. It's always a fight. And it's one of the major impediments to any sort of advocacy which you're doing, is you're going to be spending about half of your time arguing in a fruitless kind of a way with the administration up on Beacon Hill.
Mm.
They won't put it in as they won't put in a solid funding mechanism for the RTAs. It's obvious that it has to happen. The RTA groups, which met a couple of years ago to look at the problem, all told the government you have to fund it on a steadier basis. You're just driving everybody crazy out there.
Yeah.
But they won't do it.
Yeah. And putting this conversation as well into context with COVID-19, how has COVID impacted transportation in the Worcester area?
At first, they did very little. They did nothing. The drivers union, the ATU, put their foot down. They say, we are not going to be operating buses under these conditions. You have to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And at that point, what they did about it was that they eliminated about half of the seats on the buses, so that every other seat has upholstery on it, and the rest are marked with a sign, don't sit here. So obviously you can only fit half as many people on a bus now. So if you were on a crowded bus before, what's going to happen? What happens is that people get left behind. Yeah. And the board and everybody has assured us that there will be vehicles standing by. They won't be leaving people at the stops. But the reality of the situation is that you're going to be standing there waiting for the next bus. Maybe if you're in a wheelchair and they can't take you on board, they'll call the office and some vehicle will come around that can handle the wheelchair. But I don't know how they're doing that. And I haven't actually talked to anybody who has had an extra ride sent to them by the WRTA. So, and the biggest thing which has changed since COVID is that at first they had everybody entering through the back door so that they wouldn't be in contact with the driver. Yeah. Obviously that meant we weren't going to be paying because the fare box is in front. Yeah. So the Zero Fare group has basically had a de facto pilot put into place about how this would work. Yeah. And so that's a very positive development is we've seen ridership stay higher in the Worcester area than in any other RTA for this at this time. Yeah. It's a real feather in our cap here that we've been able to keep as many people on the bus, but at the same time, it does represent a problem. We have 2/3 of the ridership we had before COVID. We have half as many seats on the buses. I mean, you don't have to be a math genius to see what's going to happen here.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think, so, with those changes in patterns and ridership, do you think that transportation is as big a priority in the community as it was before COVID? Do you think the community sees it as a priority?
Well, if you're in an essential job and you have to go to work every day on a bus, you are vividly aware of what's going on at this point. Yeah, it's a real pressing concern. Am I going to be infected on the bus today? Yeah. And as far as I know, there's no tracking which is going on, which can tell us one way or another whether that's happening. However, I don't think that there's a lot of transmission happening on the buses.
Mm.
We haven't seen any drivers infected as a result of something that happened on a bus.
Okay.
And so that's a clue.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you, so I guess taking it back to something you talked about earlier, you were mentioning a couple of different parts of the city that have had, maybe a route eliminated or a stop eliminated and who have to walk further to get to a bus stop. Do you think there are parts of Worcester or populations of people within Worcester that have greater or worse or better or worse access to transportation than others? And if so, who?
Uh, I won't get into exactly where the area unserved areas are. You can see it on a map. If you just look at a map of where the bus routes go, it's pretty obvious what's missing.
Yeah.
I was at a community meeting with Gary Rosen last winter before all this happened,
Mm-hmm.
and this was an area which had been served by a route at one point back when these were city buses,
Mm-hmm.
and it's no longer served by any buses at all. And people in the meeting were still missing their bus after all these years. They said it was wonderful when we had a bus and we could just go downtown. And but we don't ask people in these surveys, for the reason why they don't ride the bus. We survey riders and ask them why they do ride the bus. That's what Central Mass Regional Planning does. And the reason why is because that answers the needs of the reports which are sent back to the DOT.
Yeah.
It doesn't meet the needs of the city of Worcester or the people who live in greater Worcester.
That's interesting.
And the remaining riders who stay on the bus basically get punished by worse service because other people aren't riding.
Yeah. And so thinking about other forms, so aside from public transportation, right? We know that folks thinking about like more active forms of transportation. Do you think that there are parts of the city that have better or worse access to active transportation? So, thinking about whether sidewalks are, whether those are accessible, whether it's possible to bike different places. What do you think about that?
Well, the city has made a real effort over the last couple of years to improve sidewalks here and there. Okay. Building new sidewalks, believe it or not, can run into opposition from communities, from people who live on a street. And so, but in places where this has happened, the sidewalk has eventually been seen as a real asset. Jane Jacobs in the Woo. Do you know about this group?
Mm-mm.
Well, it's basically a group which advocates for walkability.
Okay.
And it's what's her name? Joyce Mandel.
Joyce
runs the group.
And what's the name of the group again?
I'll get you a link on it, okay? Because she's not on social media, and I don't know if there's a website, but I communicate with her through email. So I'll find that for you and get that to you. Because she knows more about the walkability issues than I do.
That's it. Okay.
Bike lanes, we have all up and down Mill Street, which is really a road. It's just 4 lanes in most places, with big wide margins. There are nominally bike lanes on the side, but actually, for all practical intents and purposes, they're used for walking because the sidewalks are bad, or they're used for parking if they're near the pond. and just so it's not marked as a bike lane. And actually, I tell people that's a bike lane, and they never knew it. Who've been living here for years.
Mm. So I'm curious. So as I mentioned before, one of the aims of this project is stable housing. And the reason we are focusing on housing is because we know that sometimes when we see transportation development, it leads to residents being pushed out in, different forms of gentrification. And so I'm wanting to know how you think about that linkage between transportation and housing.
Like I said, there really isn't a lot of planning which goes on
Mhm.
to allow people who need to use public transportation to allow them to live near a bus stop or particularly near the hub. That downtown has had this problem for years, that nobody lives down there anymore, and so that's the and but at some point we're going to have to look at this. We've got malls which are failing all over the place. And these would be perfect places to develop, a mixed use, a community, which already probably has a bus route going to it, which is no longer taking anybody to this dead mall. So that would be one way of looking at it. I was sort of hoping something like that would be thought of up at Greendale Mall, but now apparently that's going to go to Amazon.
Mm.
But that'll probably also lead to an uptick in people using the bus there, because most of the people working at Amazon probably can't afford a car.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And actually while we're on that note, you're talking about potential development. I want to know your thoughts about a couple of newer developments in Worcester. Um, how do you feel about the transit-oriented development that's going on downtown? So like the Kelly Square, Canal District, Polar Park. What are your thoughts about some of that development?
I'd be very surprised if any of that remained affordable for people who can't pay, $1,200 a month and plus utilities. Uh, it's it's not that different. The costs, for a place to live between here and Boston at this point. Boston's a little more expensive, but we're right up there.
Mm.
And there's and at the bottom end, where there has to be some sort of housing subsidies and everything like that. You can search and search if you're in need of a place, and you're very lucky to find one. There's not a lot out there. And so, as far as I know, there's no plan to subsidize housing near transit. There's no policy
Mm.
which is in place to do that, as far as I know. There may be something happening at the city manager's office that I haven't heard of, because they keep their cards close to their chest, but I haven't heard anything.
And what about the commuter rail? So the proposed changes to the commuter rail, I believe there's like the proposed additional track that is being added so that two trains can come in at once. What are your thoughts about that?
I, that's great. Part of that is happening because they want to have a level platform
Okay.
so that you can just step on and off. Right now at Worcester, you have steps you have to get up,
Mm.
and you can imagine the problems which this causes for
Yeah.
people who have limited mobility.
Yeah.
Uh, it's really crazy. But I'm very happy to see that we are considering East-West Rail now.
And I was just about to ask you about that too.
I used to go to New York City back when I could travel,
Okay.
and it was great being able to get on a bus, go to Springfield,
Mm.
and once you get to Springfield, they have their own hub there, and it's much more suitable than ours. It can take a lot more buses.
Yeah.
There are a lot more trains that come through there. and Connecticut sent their metro up to Springfield,
Hmm.
so I can get to New York City on first on the Connecticut metro, and then hop down to Bridgeport, and at that point I'm on the New York metro, and I get right into Grand Central Station,
Hmm.
and I can do all of that because I'm a senior for about $10, $12. So actually, I'm going all the way from Springfield to New York City for less than it cost me to take the Peter Pan from
Wow.
Richmond to Springfield.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's a nice ride. The connections are frequent enough so that it works. And if you had an east-west rail,
Hmm.
I could save an hour on the trip,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, definitely open up opportunity. That's for
But
sure.
also, I used to live out in the Berkshires, so if they can get it as far as Pittsfield, that's going to revolutionize the entire economy of the state.
Yeah. I know that they had a group that was doing the East West Rail study, and I think the final report in the study was just released a couple days ago. I don't know. I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't read it yet, but yeah, it's exciting to be thinking about next steps for that. So I want to ask you this, and again, you may have already you've not may have already you've already answered a little bit of this, but I kind of just want to ask it to you more plainly, and to also see if anything else comes up. What do you think people in the Worcester region most want improved in terms of transportation?
The first thing which it always comes up
Mm,
is that the buses do not run on time.
yeah.
That's number one. Uh, the the management of the bus company will tell you that in fact they do run on time.
Mm,
What we're seeing is not real,
yeah.
but part of that is how they define on time.
Mm,
They define on time as being within 6 minutes of the scheduled time.
mm,
You can show up 1 minute early at the hub. You aren't supposed to show up any earlier than that. And so the reason why is because we have 35 buses out there and there are only 8 slots at the hub. So if somebody shows up at the wrong time,
mm.
the next bus in can't park. It drives around and around with everybody on board going crazy because they can see their bus getting ready to leave. And until their bus leaves, they can't get off the one they're on.
That's wild. Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious. Everybody,
Wow.
everybody's grumbling and please let me off.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so that's interesting. So it doesn't matter, like even if it is within 6 minutes, if it's within 6 minutes and you're coming near the hub, if there isn't space and if there is like even like a bit of timing off on the hub, you're gonna miss your other connection. Wow. Okay.
That's the second thing is missed connections,
Okay.
because a missed connection or a bad connection will add an extra 30 minutes at least, and possibly as much as 2 hours to your trip.
Mm,
There are people who go to work and they'll work for 8 hours, but their commute to get 8 miles back and forth from their house to work is taking them another 4 hours.
huh,
That's untenable. You
yeah.
can't expect people to put up with that, and they don't. That's why they find other ways of getting there. They said, forget about the bus. And there are employers who won't hire you if they learn you take the bus
Mm,
because they've had too many bad experiences with people not being able to get to work.
mm,
So that's what I hear from the business community.
yeah.
The other things which people worry about on the bus are cleanliness,
Mm,
uh, and and like I said, they worry about if they'll even have a bus next year.
mm,
It's hard to tell. And so those, but the main complaint, the biggest thing which the system could do is to do better to keep on schedule.
yeah.
That's number one.
And are you in your advocacy work right now? I know that you're involved with, you lead the RAC and you're involved with a couple of other groups. Are you working on any specific changes right now to the bus system?
Yes, I'm working on making the bus system more accountable to its passengers. Right now, you can call it customer service, and you can ask them questions. You can say, "Why isn't my bus here? Is there a bus broken down somewhere?" And they don't know because
Mm,
they're sitting in a room somewhere, and
mm,
so they have to find out by calling somebody else what's happened to your bus. It's not like they have a big, screen with everything on it, which shows where all the buses are in the room, which you where they're taking the calls from. And then if you do have a complaint and you want to have that complaint answered, if you want to see the report on that complaint, you need to tell them that. You need to check off a little box at the bottom of the form, which is down in the fine print, or you'll never hear from them again. Now that's ridiculous. I mean,
mm.
why would you be calling in or writing them a note if you didn't want to hear from them about it?
Yeah.
But this saves them a lot of time. Now,
Mm,
the first thing which they want to do after you make your complaint is they investigate,
mm,
and what that amounts to is they give everybody every chance possible to prove that it didn't happen, or that if it did, it wasn't as bad as you said it was.
mm,
They they'll do almost anything to get out of
mm.
having to admit there was a mistake
Yeah.
of some sort.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, one of the things we're going to be doing on my website is trying to get people to talk about their problems in a more neutral sort of a way, where they're not being aggressively challenged at every step. And then once we do see what the common complaints are,
Mm,
I hope to be able to sort of deliver it in bulk to the WRTA.
yeah.
So that's my next step.
Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, no, I'm interested in seeing how that turns out. And what you hear. I'm sure you're going to hear some of the things that you already hear from folks in person while talking to them. It'll just be more formalized in writing on the website. Yeah, but that's interesting. Do you, so I know we have about 15 minutes left, and I have just a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
Um, One, and I think I may already know your answer to this based on some things that you shared earlier, but what are your thoughts about, micro transit, so on-demand shuttles, and micro mobility, so like bike and scooter shares for the Worcester region? How do you think that that is something that Worcester could use? How do you think that residents would respond to those types of programs?
I think it's definitely something that Worcester should have.
Okay.
I it's we need to have better ways of getting around in this town. What we have now is not working, and that doesn't matter whether you're a driver or a bus passenger. It's getting to the point where we need to take a look at other ways of using the streets.
And I'm curious, when you say for drivers as well, what are some of the issues? Is it mostly traffic that drivers come up against? What are the challenges
Yes.
that they face?
Yeah, if you're at Lincoln Square
Mm,
in the mornings or the afternoons, it's a very complicated intersection. You probably know it better than I do,
mm,
and you can wait for two. You usually wait for two light cycles
mm,
there. Sometimes you have to wait even longer. Sometimes you have to wait three light cycles.
mm,
Now, this is there's so many people trying to get through that intersection at the rush hours. That is, and there are other areas which are the same way. Kelly Square,
yeah,
a few others around the city, which where traffic really gets plugged. And out on 290, things can be at a standstill for some time.
mm,
And so this is something has to be done there.
okay,
There's the buses, on the other hand, don't have to obey the same traffic lights as everybody else. There's a traffic signal priority.
Mm.
It exists at every major intersection in the city of Worcester, and it's regularly used by fire and safety to get through the crowded intersections. The light will stay green in their direction for longer.
Mm.
And there are various ways of doing this and various levels of urgency, which can be installed in the system. And every bus that we have by federal law has to have the unit on board which can activate traffic signal priority, so that we have all the software in place, we paid for it, we have all of the hardware in place all over the entire system. It's simply a question of somebody at the city council saying, let's turn it on.
Okay.
And the buses would be able to get through all those intersections a lot more easily.
Mm.
And it gives you an idea of how much they think about transportation, that nobody wants to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sorry I haven't addressed housing as much as you would have liked.
Oh, no. I honestly, like I said, the project is primarily about transit, just thinking about continuing to make housing and neighborhoods stable through, while still developing transportation. So no, that's absolutely fine. I actually have, so one of the last questions I do want to ask you is, you just talked about the city managers and city council, and you've mentioned a few different decision-making bodies during our conversation today. And I want to know, if you had the ears of people who make decisions around transportation or housing, if you had their ears right now, what are some of the things that you would encourage them to do to improve transit and housing? And this could be either specific items or even their approach to making decisions around transportation. What would you encourage them to do?
Let's talk about funding mechanisms. Very briefly.
Okay.
The city of Worcester has, and the city of Worcester's largest physical asset is their road system, is the street system.
Okay.
And the city of Worcester gives it away for free to all the drivers who come into town. Sometimes they even have subsidized parking at their place of work. And even if they do have to pay for parking, that's all subsidized in ways. I don't think there are a lot of traffic tickets handed out in Worcester, and I'm not even sure that that money stays in the city of Worcester. I've heard that it goes straight to the county management. And so there's very little impulse to give out tickets in the city. But if the curb was correctly valued, then you would be able to fund all sorts of other transportation projects. Don't you think Amazon or UPS would pay to know that they had a special space out in front of a building they usually drop off at? Don't you think they'd pay for that? Of course they would. And I hate to say it, but with all these free drivers coming to town, I think that there really ought to be a more that they're putting into the system too. Because if they were paying just a little bit, just a few cents in each time they came to town, that would give enough money to the city so that we could do all kinds of micro transit programs, run more frequent buses, and all the rest of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's something that no one has no one has said that as explicitly so far. So yes, thank you for that.
There's a very good book called The Sovereign Wealth of Cities.
Okay.
Which talks a lot about the links between transportation and housing, and shows cities in Copenhagen and a number of others where this has been used to great advantage, and there's been a lot of economic development which the city now owns as a result of these policies. So it's not like we're making money for somebody else. It adds to our own wealth.
So I just want to know with the last bit of time we have. So, well, one thing I want to mention is that for this project, again, we are in the assessment phase right now, and that'll probably be going until I think April of this year. And then we'll kind of move into the people's assemblies. But as soon as there are updates to share, or we're wanting to organize and get residents to participate, and or wanting to have conversations with residents who are already gathered in different spaces, I'll definitely be reaching out to you. One thing that I would love if you could do, and I can send it right after we finish talking, is there's a list of people that I've either talked to or plan to talk to in Worcester about these issues. And I would love if you could review it and let me know if there's anyone who's missing that you would recommend that I talk to. So that
Okay,
would be really helpful.
I can
Um,
do that.
yeah, that would be great. And oh gosh, what else was I gonna say? And I would, like I said, you are such a wealth of information and knowledge. If I have any follow-up questions, do you mind if I just shoot you an email, or what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can send me an email. You've got my phone number.
Okay.
Any way you want to get in touch with me. But emails I look at once a day.
Okay.
So if there's anything which is immediate, give me a call.
Okay. Will do.
And so the other thing is that I'd like to. I'll be talking to my website developer because I don't know how all this is done.
Yeah.
I'd love it if we could share this conversation we've had on my website.
I mean, if you are comfortable with that, absolutely, we can share the conversation. I will send you the recording. I can absolutely send you the recording.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I'll talk to my website developer and they can tell me how hard this is to do.
um, I did want to end with just kind of opening the floor and seeing if there's anything else that you want to share with me that we haven't already had an opportunity to talk about. Is there anything specific to transportation or housing in Worcester that you want me to know that you haven't been able to share yet?
I think we've been pretty good about covering all the bases.
Okay.
I I I'm very happy to have you advocating for a better link between housing and transportation. I think that's very important.
Mm. Yeah, we're
And
really excited.
it's an issue which has been avoided so far
Mm,
by government on nearly every level.
mm. Well, I'm excited to work on the project, excited to continue to get to know stakeholders like yourself. And like I said, I'll definitely keep you updated as we continue on with this project and move into the next stages.
Last piece of the picture,
Yes.
there's a grant right now in the city of Worcester,
Mhm.
which has been given to a group to study the effect of built barriers
Okay.
on access, on exercise,
Yeah.
and all of that. And so we're looking at built barriers throughout the city, and there are many of them, which get in the way of people working their way through town on foot or using a bicycle.
Mm, yeah.
And so that's something you should be aware of if you're not.
Okay. I will definitely. And do you know the name? Do you know the name of the study?
Uh, I know that my main contact has been Kelsey Hopkins,
Okay.
who you probably know something about.
See, I don't know Kelsey Hopkins.
Oh, you should.
Yeah. So, and maybe if that's one of the folks that you recommend that I get in touch with, when I send you the email of that list, if you could just kind of add in Kelsey's contact information, that would be really helpful.
I will. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you, Adam. This seriously, like I said, wealth of knowledge. I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to talk with me today and to share some of your insight. So.
I can talk till my voice wears out on this subject. There's so much. It's
Yeah.
so baroque. It's Byzantine, I think, is actually would be a better word.
No, I appreciate I'll just continuing to see you in the different spaces for writer advocates, Adam.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a great conversation.
All righty. I hope you have a good one. Enjoy I think we're supposed to get sunny weather this weekend. So I hope you're able to enjoy it.
Okay.
All righty. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye bye.